Hello everyone, this is Anna from Anaya Science Witch with another presentation, and this one is called Human, a Liquid Crystal Circuitry System. So in this presentation we're going to be investigating what is that, which is basically water. We're going to be investigating water in terms of human biology and physiology and geometry. So yeah, I made this in 2020 to present to a small group of people, and that's my website down there, which will link you into the YouTube channel and some blogs and information about the BioFeedback technology that I use. So down here I've got an image taken from a book called The Water Codes. So that's like a book investigating the science of water. And as you can see in the picture, this is actually a water molecule showing how geometrical it is. You can see that it's very balanced and symmetrical, and it's got all of these nodes joining to other nodes, which are basically the chemical bonds between molecules. And humans, we're made from, according to the water codes, 99% of our molecules in our body are made of water. We've got atoms first, which are the chemical elements, and then when one type of atom joins to another type of atom, that will make a molecule. So it's going from a smaller structure to a slightly bigger structure. And water is essentially made of hydrogen and oxygen atoms joining together to make the water molecule. And structure determines the function is talking about how if this water molecule structure is structured in a beautiful geometrical, symmetrical way, the functionality is going to be improved. So humans are almost entirely water, so we're a water system. And our molecules are arranged into crystalline-looking formations. And here's a quote from the water codes: "The higher the complexity of the structure of the molecules, the stronger the electromagnetic field, which indicates higher energy potential and information transfer, greater efficiency and cellular function." So if this water molecule is arranged optimally, we're going to have a higher energy transference occurring between cells. So yes, what is water made from? Oxygen and hydrogen atoms forming the water molecule, which you can see here. The red bit is the oxygen and the white bits are the hydrogen, and that molecule actually has this tetrahedron shape to it. And when this water molecule joins to another water molecule, it's done through the hydrogen joining onto the hydrogen, or bonding. And what I've got written here, water, formerly known as H2O. I say formerly known as because there's actually a bit of development in the last, well, quite a few years that's showing that water has a different phase. So H2O, strictly speaking, is not completely water, as it is in continuous fluctuation between states of solid, liquid, gas, and this fourth phase, which is more like a plasma type state. And we'll go on to inspect that. But you can imagine the plasma type state inside the body is talking more about the connective tissue or the fascia. So it's not liquid, it's not solid, it's not gas, it's more like a stretchy jelly-like substance. And you could imagine, like, if you peel the skin off aloe vera leaf and then you touch the residue, and then it sticks to your fingers, and then it stretches, and then it can go back and it doesn't break. It's kind of happening a little bit like that, like a plasma state. So here's a quote, all from Gerald Pollack, who is doing a lot of water research on the fourth phase of water, the plasma state. And he's saying, the existence of a fourth phase of water may seem unexpected, however, it should not be entirely so. A century ago, the physical chemist Sir William Hardy argued for the existence of a fourth phase, and many authors over the years have found evidence for some kind of ordered or structured phase of water. Fresh experimental evidence not only confirms the existence of such an ordered liquid crystalline phase, but also details its properties. It is more viscous, dense, and alkaline than H2O, and has relatively more oxygen since its formula is H3O2. So that's saying that there's one extra hydrogen atom and one extra oxygen. As a result, it has a negative charge. So when you think about, you check out the Amplify Your Frequency video presentation I've made, I'm talking a lot about the electromagnetic charge on cells. And you can think of it like a battery. You've got a positive end of the battery and a negative end of the battery. And positive energy is taking energy from the battery resource and it's sending it out to another source. And then at the negative end of that battery, it's actually magnetically attracting new energy into it. So depending on what you're doing with that battery cell, you can be recharging it with a negative polarity, or you can be using it to feed another source. And you can also think about it, if you're in a positive charge, you're draining the energy of that cell. And if you're in a negative polarity, you're actually recharging. So what he's saying is that this, as a result of this plasma state with this extra atomic addition, that plasma state of water has a negative charge, and like a battery, it can hold energy for storage, and it can also deliver that energy when needed. So if we're in a negative polarity, recharging our cells all the time, our water molecules, we're actually going to have an abundance of energy as a resource. So how do we put water into our bodies? So through our nose, we're obviously breathing in oxygen and hydrogen because they're in a gaseous formation. And then the lung, that's absorbed into the lungs. And then through our mouth, we put in food and water. And the stomach is actually absorbing the hydrogen through the food and the water intake. So we've got two forms of breathing in energy and eating energy. And then in Chinese medicine, the organ, the spleen, it's extracting useful elements and transforming them into nutrients and part of the blood formation. And some of the extracts are sent up to the lung, and that's happening in a gaseous process. And then the extracts from the digested chemical ingredients are mixing in the heart to make the blood. And obviously the blood is carrying oxygen and nutrients via the vessels to our entire body. And so you could consider that blood is water. It's a watery substance. It's just coloured red from the iron content, but it's essentially a water system. And when the blood returns to the heart through the venous system, it's got less oxygen. So it's got a slightly different coloration of the red. And this darker red appears blue because of how the light travels through the skin. So that's why on this diagram you'll see that the venous system is always coloured blue, and then the arterial system is always coloured red. So when the heart is moving the blood, when it's got oxygen in it, it travels away from the heart through the arteries, and that's delivering oxygen-filled blood to all of the body for nutrients. And then when all of that's run out, the venous system will collect the blood without oxygen, and then it returns it back to the heart. The lungs are breathing in more oxygen, it mixes it, refuels it with the blood with oxygen, and around we go. So is the molecular structure more important than the cellular ingredients? Talking about water. So this is a quote from the water codes. It is not the chemical ingredients, so you can think about chemical ingredients as elements. It's not the chemical ingredients that are important, it's the shape and structure of the entire unit. What is important are the pattern and the shape of the structure. So it's talking about the more geometrically structured these molecules are, the higher efficiency of electricity transfer is going to occur. So it's not necessarily all of the minerals and things we put in, according to this study. It's all about the geometry. So what is the function of this water system? It's actually helping to conduct electricity, store electricity inside our bodies, because we're made of water. 99% of our molecules are water, and then through that system is an electrical flow. So here I've got the tetrahedron again, because that is showing the shape of the water molecule in a geometrical form. And then, you've probably seen this arrangement of the above and below tetrahedrons, which form the Merkaba, which is known as the spirit light body. So that's just an interesting correspondence between, the shape of the water molecule and then this esoteric information on what we need to be spiritual, physical time traveler, you could say. So here's an interesting concept. This is a drawing by Victor Schellberger, who's a water researcher. And it's showing that there's a vortex system happening in the heart. This is the heart. So a vortex essentially means a spiral. And the spiral can go in 4 different directions. It can go from the inside to the outside, and it can go from the outside to the inside, or it can change direction and go from the inside to the outside and the outside to the inside. So that's an anti-clock and a clockwise, from the interior to the exterior and the exterior to the interior. So that's creating a 4 spiral system, and that's what you'll see in this diagram here. And it's kind of a, like when you get the tea towel and you take both ends of the tea towel, piece of fabric, and you scrunch it in different ways. That's showing essentially a contraction and an expansion, and a contraction and an expansion, and that's happening in a spiral motion. And Victor Schellberger is showing to us that the heart is actually doing a spiraling motion. So you can see here there's these light colored ones. He's got 3 strands. They're following this spiral goes into join up with that one. The spiral goes into join up with the middle one, and then that last one goes into join up with the external one. So that's 3 different spirals that are happening inside the heart. And if you know a little bit about structuring water, it's always involving moving the water, vortexing, which vortexing just means spiraling. And so in nature, when you see water flowing down a spring or a stream, this is what nature is naturally doing. It's moving in spirals. Nature doesn't move in straight lines, and this is naturally structuring the water supply. And that's why spring water from the mountain is so good. So when I came to think about the blood supply, which is water moving through the heart, and if the heart is literally spiraling the blood, then that is vortexing the blood, which is structuring it, which I find to be a really interesting concept. So it's vortexing the oxygen and the hydrogen, which is the water, and when you vortex something, you're helping the geometry become more structured and more stable, which is going to help the electricity transfer and the electricity storage capacity inside the water molecules. So blood is therefore water, therefore it can be seen as a water structuring device. As vortexing water creates a crystalline structure. Humans are made of water, and part of that water is blood, which carries the nutrients to the body. And so you can see in this drawing, they've got one going one way, one going the other way, one going this way, and one going that way. So this one's going from the center to the out, this one's going from the center to the out, and that's going from the out to the in. So that's that 4-vector clockwise, anti-clockwise, internal, external spiraling system. So that's done with heart muscles, and it's then obviously it's got an electrical signal setting off that motion in a beat, in a pattern. So in Chinese medicine, we consider the heart to be where the spirit lives, and the spirit is called Shin, and that literally means your spirit, and the heart is the house for the spirit. So I was thinking about that if we've got this blood supply moving through the heart, and the heart is literally structuring the consciousness, it's vortexing, it's spiraling, it's structuring the water, which is the blood, and as that moves through the house of the spirit is now traveling throughout the entire body via the blood. So it's quite a beautiful way to think about it. And you'll see in this image there's an upper, middle, and lower. We call them in Chinese medicine and Qigong, Tai Chi, we call them the Dantian. So basically the energy sites in the body. In Maori teaching, they call them the 3 hearts. In Irish, they call them the 3 cauldrons. And it's about how these 3 centers interact with information that we receive, and then we process that information, we output it. We can input it through the gut, through our physical senses. We can input it through our psychic awareness. Our heart energy is essentially differentiating or discerning the information, and then expressing it back out through communication, which involves the tongue and speaking, and the tongue is literally connected to the heart in the Chinese medicine correspondence links. So here's a cool extrapolation of the human systems. So at the back here, we've got this greenish looking one, and that is the lymphatic system. So you can see it's got all these different dots, which we call lymph nodes. And at certain points, they have a greater kind of collection. So the lymph nodes collect in the throat, around the thyroid, under the armpits, in the groin, and at the ankles. And this is a water system, and it's a water system responsible for gathering up all of the toxins that we produce and putting them into that system, and then flowing it to the liver and the kidneys to detoxify it and send it out of our bodies as waste products. So that's the lymphatic flow system, and it's a slow flowing system. And you can kind of imagine it like the drain pipes on a house. So, you know, everyone's got a house and it's got drains, and those drains are for collecting the dirty water and flowing it away from the house. And if those drains get blocked up with like sticks and leaves and birds' nests and all sorts of things from nature that fall in the drain, that will block up the flow. So that's like too many toxins for the system. So we always have to keep the lymphatic system cleaned and moving in order to be able to process toxins efficiently. And so this next one here, so that's got the blue venous and the red arterial system joined to the heart organ. So that's this blood circulation going through the bigger vessels, and then it goes into micro vessels, getting smaller and smaller. And then here we've got the brain connecting to the spinal cord and the spinal nerves and all of the nerves that flow throughout the body, looking like a tree. Roots of a tree. It all really does look like roots of a tree. And the nerve system carries electrical conduction through neurons or nerve cells to pick up a signal, and then that signal is moved through the nervous system to the brain, where a chemical interaction happens, and then the brain releases more chemicals or neurotransmitters to then send to the area of the body which has requested a change. And the change might be, I just burnt myself on the oven, I've got pain, I've got a wound. My body then sends directly a charge, and then what's sent back out as a response is white blood cells to start healing and cleaning the area, and some hormones to try and manage the pain. And so this next system here, we've got the muscular system. So obviously the muscles are helping our body move, and the muscular system is involving, obviously we've got muscles, and then the muscles joining to other muscles, we have tendons. So tendons are kind of like elastic straps, and when you expand and contract your muscle, the tendon that joins the muscle to the other muscle will also contract and expand like a rubber band, but it will only have so much give, so you don't have your arm flying off because the elastic band is too stretchy. It has a certain resistance, and that joins everything together in a system. And obviously this is all muscle tissue, so in these tissues, that's where we're holding a lot of the water molecules. And then skeletal system, so that's the deepest part. Obviously that's holding our bodies upright, and then the skull is protecting the brain organ, the rib cage is protecting the upper organs, the lungs and the heart, and the top of the digestive system organs. And the bones are made from a dense type of connective tissue, and the bones are arranged in a crystalline structure as well. And the bones are obviously always still growing, but they're growing at a slower rate than the rest of the body. And then here we've got the upper organs. So we've got the lungs, the heart lives in the middle there, and then this shape here is that's the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a transverse muscle that moves up and down when we're breathing, and that separates the upper organs from the lower organs. And so we've got here the stomach and the liver. The small intestines go in there, joins onto the large intestine and goes out as the waste products. And then we've got the reproductive organs, the bladder, and then the kidneys are at the back of the body, and they're living around the lumbar vertebra number 2 kind of area. So looking at some water flow systems in the more general sense, because obviously all of our molecules have got a water aspect, but there's some more obvious kind of liquidy ones. So obviously the blood circulation, carrying the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood throughout the body. And then this is what you might not have seen before. This is what we call fascia or connective tissue. Connective tissue can come in all different types of densities. So bones are a type of connective tissue, and that means they're very, very condensed, and they're more rigid, more hard. And then connecting bones to bones, we've got ligaments, and those are a little bit more flexible types of connective tissue, which means that the bone is joined to the bone, and so when you walk, you're not going all over the place, and bones aren't going out of the system, just like how I described with the muscles. So that's ligaments are to hold things in place and bind bones to bones, but still give them room to move. And this image of this type of fascia is what's seen really as under the skin. So between all these organ systems, and between the bones, between the muscles, between the ligaments, the tendons, the organs, and then the top level of the skin, we have all these different layers of this connective tissue, which helps to make things slide around so nothing gets stuck to itself, and it provides cushioning, and it also provides hydration. So in this description, mostly made of collagen fibers of connective tissue. And also you can consider this to be more of like the plasma. I'll show a video of this soon so it becomes a bit more visual. And then that lymphatic system, as I described, it's the waste collection system of the body. It's like a slow-moving drainage system. So we have to keep that one flowing so we can eliminate toxins efficiently so we don't get a blocked up system. Because when your system's blocked up, you're not able to deliver all of the nutrients to the organs, and therefore the organs run out of energy. So that's another image of this liquid crystal fascia system, which is seen under the skin. And I'm going to play this video. I've pulled it from, you can find this on YouTube. It's called Strolling Under the Skin. And it's essentially some French scientists that put microscopic cameras under inside live human bodies to record what it looks like underneath. Because a lot of the past medical research is always done on cadavers, which are dead energy systems, and you'll never get this opportunity to see something alive in a cadaver. So
this ability of matter to organize itself spatially offers an infinite potential for movement. This ability of matter.
So that was really amazing. So what you notice in that video is that you've got, this plasma type water connecting to itself, and as one part moves, the other part goes in the opposite direction, and then it kind of swings back, and it's like this, like a seesaw. And what they call, if you watch that video, it'll explain a whole lot more. It's just like a teaser. But what they're saying is that this is a phenomenon known as tensegrity. So just like a spider web in the tree, you notice how the spider web connects to all these different parts of different trees to hold its whole shape. So when it blows in the wind, even if one part breaks, it's still maintaining most of its structure. So it's an efficient structural mechanism. So in the body, we're having this too. And you'll notice that when those parts get further and further away, they're getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And then when they come back to themselves, they blob out. So it's showing this like liquid, but more solid liquid, which is what we call plasma. And that's happening under our skin. It's happening in between our muscles, and it's joining everything together so we don't fly off as an unstructured system. So blockages in water flow. So this is talking, I've spoken about the lymphatic system that can get blocked up. But other things that can block up our water system is a temperature imbalance. So our normal body system is meant to be 36.7 degrees Celsius. So that's quite warm. That's actually really warm. You can think about it in comparison to what's the temperature outside right now, and then compare that to your body and realize that you're a very warm system. So you have to maintain that so you get a proper circulation. Because when we have a warm system, our blood vessels can dilate, and therefore dilation means being as open as possible, and therefore more blood and nutrients can flow through. But if we get cold, we will contract those vessels, and then not much can get through. And that's what happens in the human body if we get too cold. So here's a frozen river system, just to kind of give a visual for that. But in Chinese medicine, we're always encouraging people to have warm food and not cold food. So cold food you could imagine as too much just you pull it out of the fridge and you eat it. It's actually cold. And that will, if you consume too much cold food over a long period of time, you're putting out your fire, because the body is a balance of the water and fire. And if you continuously put cold on a fire, then it's going to dwindle. And if you look at some of the other videos I've got, especially the one on Ayurveda, we talk about the Agni, or the digestive fire. And that's really important to maintain for longevity. So if you have a strong fire, every time you put food in the fire, it can cook it efficiently and you get all the nutrients, and there's not much waste product produced because it's used up everything. If you have a fire that's gone a little bit small, because you keep putting damp wood on the fire gets weaker and weaker and weaker, because it doesn't have enough energy to burn the wood and also dry out the dampness at the same time. So then it's going to get weaker and weaker, and then when it loses its strength, it cannot do the full digestive job, and it's going to produce a side effect of unprocessed food, which is called toxins, and then that blocks up the lymphatic system. So you can see how the cold will block, and then that will go on to produce another blockage, because you're trying to offload those toxins, which didn't even need to be there in the first place. And then also another aspect of cold, because if that cold is in the organs for too long, then that can also, because the stomach and then going down into the lower intestines, that's in the center of the body. Because if I folded myself in half, the middle region is my pelvis, top of the legs, that's halfway. And so if you block up your halfway circulatory system with cold, your circulation from the above to the below is going to be impaired, and then also you're not going to get a proper nutrient delivery system to the peripheral and also to the organs. So you cannot flow ice blocks very efficiently in a water system. So if you imagine trying to do acupuncture on this water system, you'd have to crack through the ice to access the water underneath. So there's no point doing an acupuncture session on someone that's got a lot of cold in their body, because first you have to take the cold out. And also, you cannot cook food in a cold oven, as my teacher would always say. It's a good way to imagine it. You've got an oven, and you can imagine that your stomach is the oven. And if you want to make a cake, you're going to turn it on to like 180 degrees Celsius, I think. I haven't baked for a while. But if you just want to warm something or keep it warm, you're putting it on 90 degrees. But if it's not at the correct temperature to bake a cake or cook the food, it's not going to be possible. So we have to keep our stomach fire at the right temperature. And that means not interfering with it with dumping cold into it all the time. That will eventually dwindle the fire. And so this chart I've got in another presentation. It's by Truly Heal, who's a pulsed electromagnetic field research person. And it's basically showing what is blocking up this water system here is toxins. So you've got toxins from the urban living, industrial, mining, and agricultural. So that's all the organophosphates and the pesticides and everything that comes through the waterways as the drainage system. It eventually does flow down into the earth and into the water system. And what's happening in there is it's going to change chemically the biological life circuit, and then that's going to flow into the earth, and then we're growing food on the earth and we're eating things from that ocean. So we're participating in a sort of a round and round never-ending toxic cycle. And toxins like heavy metals, chemtrails, genetically modified organisms, undigested food leads to the inability to process nutrients. So heavy metals block up the cell receptor. There's a door on a cell, it's called a receptor, and it lets things in and out. And the heavy metals in the body, which is like mercury, aluminium, all that stuff, that can stand in the doorway, and then it will block the door. So the pollution blocks our access to nature's resource, and we need vitamin D coming from the sun. So if that's blocked by sprays or chemtrails, we're not getting all of the light radiations in the color spectrum. And we also need fat in our bodies to build hormones, and that's coming from the telluric radiations, which telluric means earth, so it's like what we're growing on the food earth, in terms of animals, because we do need the best resource of fat is coming from animals, and we need and we also need the minerals that are produced that are meant to flow from the land into the vegetation crops that we grow, and all of those combine together to start building hormones in the body, which are our chemical signaling system through the neurons. So as I said before, heavy metals are blocking the cellular nutrient uptake. So this is from Truly Heal again. Here's the wall of the cell. You think of the cell like a bubble. And here's the doorways, and these doorways are called receptors. So this is showing things flowing in or out. And that in or out flow actually has a positive or negative charge depending on the direction that the cell wants to either bring something in or send something out. If we remember, if it's got a positive charge, it's sending away from itself. Negative charge is bringing towards itself. So depending on the direction on that doorway, you're going to have a four-directional system happening again. And then the red dots are showing that there's a toxin blocking, and that nutrient can't get in. Look at that one. So fluoride, that's in the water supply for making our teeth healthy, and it's in the toothpaste for the same reason, but it's also a neurotoxin. Chlorine actually disturbs the thyroid, which is in swimming pools and in drinking water. You're showering in it. Chlorine makes the thyroid function deplete. Bromine, it's in sprays, aluminium, it's in deodorants and cooking things. All neurotoxins and all carcinogenic, and yeah, that's in the water supply and the chemtrails, and it's hard to avoid. So electrical systems, so you can think about electricity. If you want to use Chinese medicine, it could be an aspect of qi, vital essence. And here's Alex Gray's artwork showing the human body system. So we've got these chakra points, which are actually where the endocrine organs live, and the endocrine organs produce the hormones from the ingredients that we put into our bodies. And when there's hormones acting in the brain, they're called neurotransmitters. And so those hormones and neurotransmitters are sending chemical signals throughout the nervous system, throughout the entire body, to tell organs to do certain things. Switch this on, switch that off. Produce more of this, produce less of that. And then the white lines are the meridians, acupuncture meridians with the acupuncture points on there. And then obviously you've got the skeletal structure. You can see there's the rib cage there. You've got the blue ones and the red ones as the arterial and venous system. And then you've got the yellow ones as the nerves. So this is like a super amazingly complex, anatomically correct drawing of human radiating light, because we're producing electricity, and then that's radiating out into the atmosphere, and then you could see all these little lines joining all those radiations. And if you refer back to that strolling under the skin, it's looking a lot like that plasma connective tissue, but it's in a etheric state. Because in cosmos, there's also a form of plasma, and plasma is essentially the electrical carrier. So I've got this on another presentation. I do repeat myself on these because that's how we get information to stay. So this is George Lakhovsky's drawings of a cell and then a zooming in. And George Lakhovsky was the Russian scientist that invented the multi-wave oscillator. That's a device that I've been using in my clinic. which is an electrical device acting on the cellular functions. And this is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is made of phospholipid, which is a type of fat. So that's why we need fat in our diet, so we can build cell membranes. And also fat goes around the nerves. So there's this is the nucleus of the cell, where all of that activities take place. So you can imagine the nucleus of the cell is like a mini organ system, and in here they call them organelles. So it's like a microscopic organ system. And then in here he's got essentially a DNA filament or a chromosome, and then he's zoomed in on it here. And a chromosome is essentially an efficient wiring system, and it is spirally bound. So if you stretched out that chromosome, it would unwind itself, and that's what is the DNA helix. And this is a bound up one, so it's essentially showing that that chromosome, if you unwound it, it would be super long, and then if you condense it in a slinky spiral, it's an efficient usage of space. It's minimized the space it takes up by a whole lot. And George Lakhovsky is also showing that this chromosome, when you cross-section it, there's an electrical conducting liquid inside and a dielectric material around the outside. So the dielectric material is like the insulation around the conductor. So on our nerves as well, we have a layer. You can think about it like a wire. So you've got an electrical wire, like your laptop cable, and then around that you've got a layer of plastic, and that's an insulation so that electricity doesn't escape the direction of the electron transfer system. And so in the body we have that insulation is called a myelin sheath, and that's made from fat. So fat's really super important. So yeah, storing charge in an electrical coil system. And cells are mini electrical circuits as discovered by George Lakhovsky in the early 1900s, capable of induction, resistance, and capacitance. So induction means the energy is not wasted, it's actually being recycled back into itself, and that's why that helix spiral is in a certain proportion, which is to do with the Fibonacci ratio, which is a natural inductance ratio system. So you're putting energy out, but you're also bringing it back in, so you're not leaking energy out unnecessarily. Resistance is basically when you've got energy flowing in a direction, and then resistance is actually making it kind of regulated. It's not going way too fast, or it's not, yeah, it's kind of just got a system of regulation. And capacitance means that there's a discharge happening. So if the energy does build up too much, so it doesn't overcook the system, there is a discharge of energy. So piezoelectric bone crystal structure. So here's what they call a histological sample of a bone, which just means a microscopic anatomical photograph. So this is the human bone, and that's the marrow inside, and you can see that it's this beautiful rainbow system. So that's essentially showing that there's all these different state changes of chemical change, pressure change, because as we know that we can record frequency and color as well as sound. So that's showing that there's all these different processes taking place. And bone is a specialized form of connective tissue, and bones are 50% of them constructed of calcium crystal. And so a class of crystalline solid, intermediate in electrical conductivity between conductor and an insulator. When certain crystals are put under stress or pressure, piezoelectricity is produced. And this is just my thinking on it. If the bone is surrounded by all of this water molecules, that is essentially creating a slight pressure on the bone. And then when we move the bones, creating an elastic dynamic as well, and all of that could be producing the piezoelectric release from the bones, and that is possibly to do with the light emissions that humans can be produced, which you can see as Kirlian photography, recording the light emissions. So here's just an example of different states of carbon. So, in nature, all of the elements on the periodic table, they're always changing from one to another, depending on the climatic factors, the environmental factors, the heat and the pressure. So one element can change into another, going around in a different cycle. This is showing that these are all made of carbon. That's a diamond, that's the graphite, and that's the coal. So they've got essentially the same atoms, but because of different pressure changes and temperature changes, they have transformed. So Jerry Tennant, he is an ophthalmologist that did a lot of research into cells when he needed to heal himself of a brain infection, and he said that he had the theory that if he could understand how one cell would be fixed, then that would apply to every single other cell. And so he did some restudy, and he discovered that pH, which is potential hydrogen, which we know as this acidic to alkaline chart, showing, well, it's often related to different foods that we can put in as ingredients. So he is relating that to cellular voltage. So he's basically saying that pH is a measurement of voltage inside a liquid state. So we are a liquid state, we're made of water. So he's showing that in this 7.35, 7.4544, this is normal, and that's measured at negative 20 to negative 25 millivolts. So as we remember, the negative charge is bringing energy towards itself. So that's a recharge system. So when we're in neutral or alkaline, not alkaline, neutral, we're actually bringing energy towards ourselves in an electromagnetic sense. So we're recharging the cellular battery. And then if we get an injury or we need to produce new cells to heal something, he says we actually have to double that voltage up to negative 50. So that's 7.88, which is getting still in the neutral. It's on the alkaline side, but it's not up here. If you go to alkaline, you're actually throwing the seesaw out of whack. It's like you don't want to be down here and you don't want to be up there. You're still in there, but you're just slightly going to the alkaline zone. So depending on what you're eating, you might need a few more extra alkaline things, and then you just reduce it. And then he's showing as well in terms of voltage that once you get into the more acidic end of the chart, obviously the voltage starts dropping, you're attracting less energy towards, and then when it gets down to 0, there's going to be a polarity flip. And so instead of pulling energy into the cell, it's flipped, and now it's sending energy away in the positive charge. And that positive charge is where diseases occur, cancer occurs, 6.48. So that's in that yellow zone. So you can see how it's quite a tight little system of this maintaining neutral. So that's what's required for cells to be normal. And when electrons are running through a conductor, like a copper wire, they are there or they are not. If the switch is on, you have electron donor, which means you're giving electricity to something, being a donor. And if the switch is off, there's no electrons. So that's basically talking about, is the circuit flowing electricity? However, a solution liquid provides a different situation. So that's talking more about an electrical wiring system, probably in terms of plugging in appliances. However, a solution liquid provides a different situation. The solution may be an electron donor or an electron stealer. So that's talking about that positive and negative system. So the electron donor and the electron stealer is the positive. One measures the voltage of a solution with a sophisticated voltmeter. By convention, if the solution is an electron donor, one puts a minus sign in front of it. Okay? And if the solution is electron stealer, one puts a positive. A solution that is neither an electron donor nor an electron stealer is called a pH of 7. Hydrogen has a role in electrical conductivity. So if you remember back at the beginning, we had the water molecule, and it had the red center, and then it had the white hydrogens coming off. So we're going to be talking about what that's doing in terms of electrical flow. So this woman here, Mei-Wan Ho, she did the really awesome paper on showing acupuncture meridian system as an electrical flow system. So new evidence indicates that hydrogen is quantum delocalized by neighboring water molecules, even in the liquid state, predisposing water to proton conduction, especially in confined nanospaces. Water nanotubes aligned by collagen fibers fulfill all the criteria for proton superconduction, making them excellent candidates for the meridians of traditional Chinese medicine as proposed 15 years ago. Delocalized electrons are spread across more than one atom. Usually electrons in materials are bound to one atom, and atoms are held together by the interactions of the charges on different atoms. And in some cases, electrons can be shared between atoms and are then called delocalized. A proton conductor is an electrolyte, typically a solid electrolyte, in which H plus 1 are the primary change carriers. So in Chinese meridian acupuncture flow system, our meridians are one directional. So the lung meridian flows from the lung organ to the thumb, and that's happening both ways. And then the large intestine meridian connects from the fingertip, and it flows to the face, and then it goes into the organ. So it's going either from the inside of the body to the outside of the body, to the outside of the body, to the inside of the body, via the arms and the legs. So she's saying basically that because of the way that the hydrogen bonds to the hydrogen inside the water system, it does that when the hydrogen bonds to the hydrogen, it's actually creating a superconductive highway. And what a superconductive highway is a one-directional electron flow highway. Superconduction means it's going in one direction so efficiently that there's like nothing doing resistance on it. So it's basically a very optimized electrical flow system. And she's essentially saying that the hydrogen bond inside the water system, you could compare that to what is making up the meridian system. So that's why Jerry Tennant is also saying that the meridians are stacked muscle battery packs, because these meridians do flow in a one-directional highway, which means they're a superconducting highway. And those meridian systems, especially in the muscles, in the sinew system, when we do kinetic, elastic, chemical energy recharging, that is feeding back into the related organs. So that's how we can charge up our organs by activating our meridian system. And that's what was called exercise. So meridian muscle divisions, the meridians are sections of the entire body system. Meridians are one-way directional flow systems. Hydrogen bonding creates superconductive highway for electricity to move within the water, the medium for electricity. Superconducting liquid crystalline water aligned with collagen fibers in the fascia as acupuncture meridians of traditional Chinese medicine, author Mei-Wan Ho. So this is just showing some meridian muscle division systems. So you can see how it's connecting through the muscle system. So this one here is the bladder channel, running from the little toe and over the top of the head and finishing in between the eyes, either side of the nose. And this is well, the gallbladder channel, essentially. Not quite accurate as acupuncture channels. That's the gallbladder channel there. You can see it's running up the side of the body, through the hip, a little bit into the front, connecting with the front of the pelvis, through the side, through the shoulder, and into the back of the head. Gallbladder channel connects the entire side of the head. You can just see here that this is the recharge battery system as muscles. So looking at comparisons of, here's a wire from an Apple computer, and here's a muscle drawing of a muscle fiber inside a human body. And you can see that they're kind of similar in their construction. So did the people who make wires observe that this was such a highly efficient system that they then copied it? Because you can see on the external of the muscle fiber, there's a sheath, which you could see as that white sheath. And then essentially between that, I mean, this one here, that's going around in this kind of horizontal plane. And then these ones that are coming out here, oh no, they're going horizontal, and that's going vertical. It's going around. I don't know what you'd say for that. So it's basically, when a muscle moves, it's going, you'll see it in strolling under the skin. There's a projection, and as that projection moves, there's the fascia is holding everything together with that tensegrity phenomenon through all of the plasma. So the muscle doesn't stretch way too far, and then it can actually contract back. And as that's happening, there's actually a rotation, vortexing happening at the same time, and that's essentially what that sheath is doing there. So yeah, have a watch of that video, you'll get to see it. And so that is, yeah, it's a vortexing system again, and that's helping to recharge all of the cells with electrical energy. So when I made this presentation, there were some people talking about taking salt out of their diet, and I wanted to address that in the presentation because from what research I've done, the human body does need salt. So, but we need the right kind of salt. So, you know, if you get the table salt, which is the, you know, that's a good salt there, but you know, the iodized salt, the crappy salt, it's been chemically treated, that's not salt. So that's got chemicals added in. But proper salt, here's like the Himalayan pink salt, I think that's probably sea salt, is really needed in our bodies as an electrical conduction ingredient. And so the question is, should I be eating salt, but rather what kind of salt should I be eating? Because of the additives and the lack of trace minerals, most salts are not good for you. So that would be anything that's come in a processed food. You don't know what they've put in there. Salt is essentially sea salt because it originated from the sea, either from modern oceans today, dead seas, or ancient seabeds. Today there are many different brands of salt and sea salt, most of which have been demineralized and chemically processed. Yay! If your salt lists one of the following common ingredients, it has been refined or processed. Sodium bicarbonate, sodium iodide, silicon dioxide, yellow prussate of soda. Okay, I'm not going to read that all out, but apparently that's what table salt is looking like instead of just sodium and chloride. So what happens, so I've explained this on Amplify Your Frequency, I'll explain it again. I've done this experiment and it does work. It's essentially showing salt conduction. So here's a power source of the mains. Here's a wire going out and it's powering up a light bulb. And then to complete the circuit, that wire comes out of the light bulb. It's meant to join onto this end of the wire, but he's split the circuit. And then he's got a nail on that end, and he's got another nail on that end, and that's creating a gap in the circuit. So instead of it being a closed circuit, it's open, which means that unless there's some communication between the gap, the electricity is not going to flow through. So what he's got here in the bucket is distilled water, which means that the water has been heated up into the point where it's evaporated out all of the mineral content, and all that's left is hydrogen and oxygen atoms. And so that's considered to be the purest form of water you can get in that process. And so he's got distilled water in there, and the water's yellow because it's reflecting the light bulb. And what happens is, when it's just got distilled water and he switches on the power source, the light bulb will not light up because the circuit is not flowing electricity through it. Then he gets some natural salt, and he starts pouring the salt into the circuit, which is still switched on at the power source. And as the salt starts dissolving in the distilled water, and he gives it a bit of a stir, the salt starts conducting electricity from the nail to the nail, and therefore completing the circuit. And so what is happening there is that when the sodium chlorine meets water, because that's the salt molecule, when that meets water, the water actually splits it apart. There's a chemical reaction, and then upon that split, an electrical charge is produced, and that's what's happening. So salt molecules contain sodium and chlorine ions. Ions are atoms with electrical charge. The charge comes from gaining or losing electrons. When salt is put into water, the water molecules pull the sodium and chlorine apart. They are floating freely. These ions carry electricity through the water. So salt, water in the water, can help to produce electricity. So that's why we need salt, and that's why, like, here's my water, but it's not just water, it's actually got a bit of salt in it. And you can, if you look up Sole, S-O-L-E, you can make your own condensed mineral mix of salt. So if you get some really good sea salt, get a 1 litre vessel, you put in about 1 inch, you get some pure spring water or distilled water, and you cover the salt with about the same volume, doubled, and you leave that for 24 hours, and then you can fill it up and to the top with the spring water and mix it around, and then that's putting a whole lot of salt into the water, and then you can use a few drops, like a tincture, and you can put that into your water, and it's going to mineralize your water. And that's what I've got in there. So often I give water to people and they're like, oh, it's salty, but it's actually helping to make electricity flow in your body. And here's an apple, and it's got a Carolean camera photograph of the energy emission photon light coming from a whole food. So coming back to, do we need cellular ingredients if the structure is more important than the function? I think so, because they're doing jobs, and we were given organs for a reason. So we need ingredients, cellular ingredients, to make hormones to act as messengers to tell our body what to do. So this is a neuron talking to another neuron. There's a gap in between called a synapse, and all the little light balls are neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters is like serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, histamine, all of that kind of stuff, and that's going from one cell to another. So it's a communication system. And what makes the do I have a slide for that? It's in my other presentation. So your thyroid organ, endocrine organ, is part of the hormone production organs, and your thyroid needs iodine essentially to do the chemical productions, and iodine is found in salt. So that's another reason we need salt, is to help the thyroid do jobs. And then the thyroid produces hormones called T4, T3, T2, thyroid stimulating hormone. Different types of hormones are produced when the thyroid gets the right ingredients, and one of which is iodine. There's above ingredients, which is DHEA, progesterone, pregnenolone, vitamin D, cholesterol, dietary fat, other minerals. All of that goes down to start providing the building blocks. And when the thyroid produces the hormone called T3, the T3 is actually responsible for controlling the voltage of the cell membrane. So if we don't have the ingredients to produce these hormones properly, we're not going to be able to do cell communication in terms of electricity. And then the T2, that's controlling the mitochondria, which lives inside the nucleus of the cell. They call the powerhouse. So that's also needed from the thyroid production. And then, as I said before, the fat acts as the insulation system on the wiring system. It's called nerve cells. And it's also found in the phospholipids, which cover the cell membrane, which is the cell membrane. And salt and other crystal minerals in water are acting as these conducting substances and chemical fuel that we use as energy. So yes, this is the chart. I always use this chart by Heather Bruce, showing what I just said of this hormonal production cycle. And this chart is actually showing the hormonal production cycle interrupted by toxins, which are essentially mostly heavy metals. And so the hormonal production starts off at the top with these three main situations: vitamin D coming from the radiant energy we get from the sun and the cosmos, and cholesterol, which is dietary fat, which the easiest way we can get that is from animal products, and vitamin B, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, a whole lot of other vitamins and minerals in there that we are meant to get from food. And all of that goes together, and this makes pregnenolone, which is known as the mother hormone, and then with what's released from the adrenal cortex, progesterone, that goes on to mix with that, and it produces DHEA, then goes down to mix with the thyroid, which then, when there is iodine present, that starts making the T4. When there's selenium, zinc, iron present, that helps the T4 to convert to T3, and that is what is controlling the electrical voltage of the cell membrane. Amazing. So if we've got toxins happening in that system, they're going to be blocking up all of this production cycle. So that's really uncool, and that's why we do heavy metal detox. So also, when I made this talk, people were inquiring about breatharianism. Is it possible? It got me thinking on it. Like, I mean, in the environment we're currently living in, I don't think it's possible at all, because the air we're breathing is full of toxins. So no. If we had a completely purified system and we were living in the Garden of Eden, maybe. But at the moment, our system is designed to process food and water through our digestive system, and we're made of water. So I don't know if you could just breathe in, you can't. What I discovered with making this also is that hydrogen is mostly absorbed through the food intake. Hydrogen makes up the water molecule, so we don't necessarily breathe the hydrogen in, we eat it. And so if you were just a breatharianism doing that, you'd just be breathing and not eating. So therefore you're not actually consuming hydrogen, therefore you can't make water. So yes, that's my thoughts. I need to investigate that more. It's just a really kind of brief having a look at it. Also, we've got this situation that's been happening since 1873, super uncool. It's something called the Corpus Alimentarius, which is basically to do with the World Health Organization if your country is in the World Health Organization, you will be under this rulership. You can look on naturalhealthnews.com to find that article. I'll try and find it, put it in the link below. It's quite interesting to read. But in his new Natural News article, he basically summarizes what the Corpus Alimentarius is doing. And it was basically, back at that time, it was the Albanian and Hungarian kingdoms wanted to control the food supply, essentially. So they started putting out laws on what could be grown or not grown, and then they started actually designing ways to alter foods. And then it lost its power. Then in the 1960s, it kind of got a resurgence, and that's what we're dealing with right now. And it's essentially showing that all nutrients are to be considered toxins. So therefore, to protect humans from toxins, they're going to remove them from the food supply. So this is the really inverted, magical flip of what they've started doing to control the food supply, therefore control health, therefore sell you medication. So if you take toxins out of food, but toxins are actually nutrients, you're taking nutrients out of food, so humans are not actually getting nutrients from food, therefore we're getting sick at an alarming rate, therefore we're going to these places to give us a pill for an ill, making people customers for life for things that were never meant to be needed in the first place. They just left the whole system of nature alone. And also in that summarization, it's talking about genetically modified designs have to be put on anything that flies, anything that lives on the land or swims, which is the animal food supply. So yeah, interesting read. And that also relates into another one I'll just mention called the Flexner Report. And that was, I think that was introduced in 1910. It's got to do with the Rockefellers. He obviously is the oil baron of America, and he discovered that at that time, around that 1900s period, scientists were starting to experiment with chemical solutions, and they found from the petrochemicals, which is part of an oil product, they could start making pharmaceutical medicines. So he wanted to get in on that money-making opportunity. So he employed, one of his employees had a brother who was a teacher, not a doctor, and he employed that guy to go around all of the medical institutions of America and all of the different practices and make an audit and just report back on what they were doing. And at that time, they were still doing massage, probably acupuncture, and traditional Native American Indian medicine, nature ways, herbal medicine, probably using electromagnetic devices such as violet rays, because the violet ray was invented in the late 1800s, and then Lokovsky invented the multi-wave oscillator in the early 1900s. So there's kind of a boom on that electro healing world. And so Abraham Flexner, who was the brother of the guy who's the teacher, not the doctor, who made the audit, he went around, he reported back, and he said that what all of these institutions were doing, unscientific quackery, and therefore I don't know how they did it. I haven't researched into the mechanisms of it, who paid off who, but essentially it resulted in a shutdown of maybe 2/3 of the medical teaching institutions and a lot of the clinics and practices, and they removed the natural medicine, and then they started replacing it with pharmacology and surgery, but they cut off all of the other branches of the original medicine. So that's what we're still dealing with. So yeah, I'll find a link for Flexner Report. There's YouTube videos explaining it too. So in terms of the breatharianism in relationship with things like Ayurveda, the science of life from India, if we've got 6 flavors all in balance, you'll find this on my tongue reading presentation. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, spicy, astringent. All of the on the tongue the flavors are recognized, and that's going to start stimulating the enzyme production for digestion, amylase production, and you've got your pre-digestive effectors happening on your tongue. So if you have those 6 flavors, you're going to start being able to assimilate, absorb all of your nutrients. And people who don't drink water are making internal water from hydrogen and oxygen. So yeah, there's someone I know that doesn't drink water, and I was thinking, how is that person still alive if they don't drink water? And then which relates back to what I was saying before, we actually get most of our hydrogen from the food we eat, and then oxygen's coming from what we're breathing into our nose and lung. So there's actually you don't maybe need to drink water to produce water, which is quite an interesting concept I still need to look to. So, and this is Masaru Emoto's famous work on effects of consciousness on water molecules. And you can see here it's very symmetrical, which is going back to that first diagram at the beginning, showing that the structure of the symmetry of the water molecular bonding system is very optimized, and that's under the influence of something positive. Same with this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. They've all got symmetry, 6-pointed star happening. And then when you get into the negative talk or thought, all of the structure completely puddles out. So that's negative, negative again, ooh, very, very negative. And then this is an example of a change state, so polluted water before praying, so it's got no structure, and then after praying, it's resolved its structure. So that's another way to think about it. That if we're made of 99% water molecules, and our water molecules are under the influence of thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and speaking and intention, whatever we're thinking, whatever we're projecting, whatever we're thinking about ourselves with our self-talk, or how we're communicating to others, is actually changing the structure of our water. So if we want a highly optimized water structuring system to therefore send electricity efficiently throughout our bodies, if we remain in a more positive attitude, we're going to be able to do that. And therefore we won't get sick, because everything is actually getting electricity supply. And then if you're always doing this kind of thoughts, you're eventually going to lead to imbalance, which is sickness. And that's how it's showing that emotions are often the precursor to being physically ill, which is what they say about cancer, especially in Chinese medicine. You might have been having this emotional disturbance for 20 years, and then poof, one day suddenly you've got cancer, not because you caught cancer, it's because your emotional talk or your resonant emotional field has created a polluted environment for so long that your body finally has to start resolving it by presenting itself in a really obvious way. So it's always an opportunity to start fixing what you created. Unless you're in a really toxic environment all the time, like Chernobyl. Move. Anyway. So concluding thoughts. Structure of the water is more important than cellular ingredients, maybe. But in the time of nutrient deficient foods, we need extra help. So here's talking about that breatharianism concept too. If we didn't have the Flexner Report and the Corpus Alimentarius intentionally stripping nutrients, toxins from our food, we'd actually be getting what we needed, and then possibly the next stage of that would be able to move into a more breatharian type of situation. But at the moment, hell no. Ill health is lack of cellular voltage. Well, Jerry Tennant shows us that. The heart seems to structure or vortex the water, which is blood is a part of water. So if you've got a happy heart, you've got happy water, you've got happy blood. And that blood flow is flowing through all of your arteries, veins, and microvessels, and supplying all of the muscles and everything. Squeezing calcium crystals may emit light, so that's the bones. Water is the medium for electrical flow, especially when it's in its plasma state, which is that H3O2, showing that there is more of a negative charge, which means it's attracting electrons to the molecules or the atoms, which means it's recharging. We need to maintain the right temperature in our water system because we're a warm water system. Proper voltage means the pH, potential hydrogen, needs to be balanced into that neutral zone. And we don't need blockages in the flow. We don't need toxins making blockages. And then, as we just talked, the emotional disturbances can definitely destructure the water and block us up. So we have to be continuously checking in with ourselves and retraining the thought habit patterns of the mind so we can maintain our wellness. So this is a person. There's their back, the trapezius muscle. There's some muscles there, and sinews. So dehydration is potentially dead water. So that's water coming through the town supply, through the pipes. Because as I said, nature spirals and vortexes water through the stream. What does a pipe do? It goes around corners and straight lines, and that's actually every time it hits, it'll spiral through and then it'll hit something, and then that denatures the structure of the water. So by the time it gets out of the tap to you, with its fluoride and its chlorine and all of its whatever else, it's no longer water. Dead. So it's not structured, it's not vortex, it's polluted, and that's probably not going to be a happy water to drink. And a lot of my clients, I ask them about their water intake and they're like, oh, I don't like water. And I'm like, well, what kind of water are you drinking? If you're drinking that water, it's poison, literally, so you can't drink that. You have to start getting into paying attention to your water intake in a new way. And so hydration is structured water, is seen in nature. The river flows, making streams, making spirals, which makes this geometry, which is then going to encourage our mind to be in a more positive direction. So this is a famous waterfall in Bali. And that's the end. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one. Have a look at my website if you want to learn more about me and my work. I'm doing online remote sessions with BioFeedback technology. And that's my Facebook, my Instagram, my YouTube as Anaya Science Witch. So yeah, thanks for watching again. Have a good day. See you later.